All right, we're still going on that light build, but I want to get back to the fun stuff. So we're going to cover some cool things in the meantime. So when I did my second light build, when you guys were away, I switched to medium, and I'm still on that. By default, let's stick with preview. There's really not much difference. If we look at here's an animated GIF. I said GIF of preview through production. You preview, medium, high, and then production quality. I don't know if you can even see in the video, but there's really not much difference there at all. Here's 4 different examples, and maybe between preview and production you can see a little bit of difference in the shadows there. You can tell more for dark interiors. Look at preview. You have all of that light leaking into the edges, whereas up in here it's you're getting some very nice contact. Well, you're getting some contact shadows on the edges that you're not getting in the other values. Most of the time you can stick with preview. You'll be perfectly okay. You'll be fine. What we didn't do for those spotlights on the walls that we could do is add, hey Ben, is add these IES profiles, and these are standard actually for manufacturers for lights as well. You could go to Philips and download the official IES light profiles for their different lights. What it would do is you would assign that to your different lights, your spotlights, and it would use that information to cast light and shadow across the surface. So we could get some additional detail there. I kind of like that we're getting some shaped light from the geometry here, but we could go even further doing that if we chose. So we might come back and do that, but this is a really nice guide. I'll try to remember to leave this description, or leave this in the description here, but this masterclass has a really great link to a event that Unreal spoke at, Epic spoke at about lighting, and it's very, very good. Here's what we were doing before. We were changing our 64 across, and then also our minimum and full light map resolution. Here they changed it to 512. And it's important to note here, they said by keeping the same minimum light map resolution used on the asset, you get the best padding on the light maps and therefore better shadows. So keep in mind you want these two values to be the same, whatever you choose for the quality. And yeah, that minimum light map resolution is determining the amount of space between all of those surfaces. So this also shows some great examples, so you don't have to build your own light. You can see what exactly is happening. So here it is, the light shining through the window, and all of these point lights and spotlights with no bounces of light. So it's hitting a surface, terminating. That's it. Here it is with one bounce. So light shines up, bounces to the floor, and then it terminates twice, 3 times, and so on. And you can see it's much more full, much more realistic as you get up to 10. But you can also see the light build increases as well. It looks like it just kind of jumped around, and maybe they weren't increasing any other settings to go with it. But yeah, it's about the same. You really don't get much difference. Oh, that's 100, not 10. Dang. Well. Huh. Yeah, I thought there'd be more difference there. And here's that level scale we were talking about before. Here you can see 1, which is the default, and you get those big basic shadows in the back, which is usually fine, right? Here's 0.5. And then if you go all the way down here to 0.1, you can see there's much more detail, but there's also much more artifacting. So there is that trade-off. And then with the smoothness here, you can see up in this wall, and then back here you can see some of that chunkiness. Scroll all the way down, no more chunkiness because they balanced it all out. Then the quality here, lighting quality, you can see all the artifacting here. And if you scroll down all the way up to 10, remember they had the level scale to 0.1, so 0.1 times 10 gives you 1. And they have a really nice balance here, right? Maybe these values are great for them, but we're not going to do that. And you can see the amount of time it takes to go between preview and production is just insane. So we're going to keep it as we are right now. I have a lot of links to share with you guys, so I'll be sure to remember to do those. Okay, so this is still going. Since we increased those resolutions, we're going to have some waiting to do. In the meantime, let's mess with some materials, because those are always fun, right? We should have been talking about those a long time ago. These shadows should be changed. I actually went back and I reverted these settings, kept the light bounces to 10, but I turned the others back to the default, just so we don't get too caught up in some of that artifacting and the build time. So let's look at this floor. I like all of the noise, I like all the detail and the macro texturing that we have, but I don't like how shiny it is there. Right? Like that it almost looks like the floor's a little bit wet or weathered. Like this would be something found in an exterior of a building. So we're gonna have to turn up the roughness to counteract that. Maybe just a little bit. Maybe the lighting is just too aggressive, but we'll see how that balances out. So okay, let's go ahead. Let's go to our concrete poured datasmith that we made, and this is the pre-made one. So they have a lot going on here already. And oops, we might get some slowdowns due to our light build here. So from the beginning, they're taking this noise value, which is called macro variation, and they're multiplying 3 different sizes of it against each other, and then reducing the contrast with this value here. And then that's being fed into the base color. So that's how we're getting all of the deliberate splotchiness that's actually breaking apart some of the texture. And if we zoom in real close, we can see there's even some small splotchiness going on in here. But there is some texture value, right? You can see the little bumpiness that is not splotchiness. That's coming from this here, the concrete poured diffuse, which is also being fed into their base color. And that's also informing the roughness. The 2 values here, so remember, this is our black to white that is being used in a linear interpolation, so A to B. So where this is black is A, where it is white, it is B. So in other words, where it is black, it is 0.5 roughness, where it is white, it is 0.2. So if we want to make it less shiny, what we should do is increase these 2 values. Or we could increase the value that gets fed into that lerp, right? So then also there's this normal value, which is doing something similar. They're doing some tiling, getting rid of noise, making depth with this noise value. They're using this pixel depth, so as you get further away from this material, it actually fades to a gradient. And it's very, very subtle, but it does help with especially large surfaces like think like parking lots or huge sidewalks that extend for half a mile. And that's being fed to this normal value, which is giving it the 3D look to it. So again, we're just going to go up here. We're going to change our roughness. So 0.8, let's go to 0.6. Let's get to a nice view of the floor before we apply it. Oh, come on, it's moving slow. Okay, there we go. When we hit save, we'll see how this updates. See some of that specularity dip down a little bit. Okay, there we go. Looks a bit flat now, don't you think? Yes. So that was a bit too steep. So let's keep this at, what was it before, 0.2? Let's do 0.3. Let's do 0.4. I like 0.2. That was good. And then we'll keep that point. No, because that's where the shine was happening. Let's make that 0.4. Yeah, let's make this 0.85. Oh dear, what did I do? 0.85. All right, let's get back to that view. Come on, buddy. Come on. All right. You can see some highlighting happening in here, but we'll get a little bit more variation, and we'll be good with that. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. It doesn't look as wet, but it does look, it has some personality to it. You ever notice when someone says someone has a lot of personality? It's never a compliment. But this is nice. Okay. So we're good there. You know, actually, I don't like how aggressive the macro variation is. Let's pull up some photographic reference here. Poured concrete interior design. Let's get how this actually looks in realistic scenarios. So here's poured concrete used on the floor and for the walls. You do see some splotchiness, right? But it's not it's not so standoffish. On the wall, you get that nice texturing. This is actually polished, so we're getting some more contrast in there. Look at this with the stairs. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's more shiny up here. It's much more weathered, but you wouldn't see that on the floor, right? Unless you're living in a warehouse, I suppose. But we are not. We're not in a warehouse here, so let's get rid of a little bit of splotchiness, and I'll show you how to do that here. This macro variation, by the way, this function they're using up here, it's a nice thing to copy to your own material, just to try to get rid of some of that that repeating that you get, not from tiling per se, but from just the repetition that you have from an ongoing material. So let's turn that up from 0.3 to 0.5, and we should see, well, we're seeing it in real time here. It's less what it was. Let's go up to 0.75, huh? I really hope it doesn't crash when it finishes that light build. Part of it, I'm sure, yeah, that's much better. Part of it, I'm sure, is me running OBS in the background as well as having all these applications open, right? Okay, so we saved that. We have not seen an update yet. There we go. Oh, I like that. I like that a lot. So we get some of the shine still. We do get a little bit of variation, but it looks much more realistic. I wish that the shadows would stay that nice, but we'll get nicer ones as soon as we get that light build done. Okay, onward. Let's get to, let's do this lamp first. We wanted bronze. This is not bronze. It was copper, yeah. Let's move this to our materials folder so it's not in the starter content, so we know exactly where it is. Let's open that up. First of all, let's talk about the color. That's bad. Oh, come on, hurry up. So same thing's happening here, right? They're taking those three values, multiplying them, using that against the contrast to get the splotchiness. Let's change that. Let's make that 0.65 across the board. Just because, you know, a nice lamp that you might see at an office wouldn't be splotchy, and if it was, it would just be natural parts of the material that's used in it. So I really don't want to bring attention to that splotchiness. Okay, so this diffuse value that they have here, here's where it is located in the browser. We're going to duplicate this. So again, right click and choose duplicate. We're going to change this to, D is for diffuse. We're going to change copper to bronze. And let's move that to our own, ignore that. We made a textures folder that's in our root folder, so we'll move that there. Okay, great. And let's replace the copper that's being used with the bronze. Currently it's identical, right? We haven't changed anything, but here we are in our texture. This is used for copper right now, so it's very pink. That grid is showing you the alpha, so the transparency. You can see there's a lot of gray values in here. There's some scratches and some weathering, some very nice pinkish orange values in there. We want to change that though, but we want to retain the copper in case we do come back to using that later. So let's get a nice view of this lamp here. Okay, let's go down and let's make this let's make this a bit more orange, huh? A bit more orange. So we're going to mess with this RGB curve to get some different values. Let's change the hue. It's a 0 to 360, so as we scroll through that, we'll see some changes. Oh boy, bit much, but it goes through the RGB spectrum, so we know kind of where we're going here. And it's not going to update in real time because we haven't saved our material yet, but let's go ahead. Let's save the bronze. We'll keep tweaking that value, but we want to just be sure that we're changing it a way we want to. Okay, oh, it looks orange. Okay, let's bring that down to 34. Or sorry, green. I'm not colorblind. I'm color dumb. Okay, that's close. Let's get it a bit closer even. Okay. That almost looks limestoney, but I think part of that is the reflection that's going on. Let's see if that PBR encyclopedia had values for bronze, shall we? So let's search bronze. No, no such luck. Let's keep tweaking this value though. It's it's too bright. Let's dip down that RGB curve. Let's see if we can get closer to a good bronze color. No, maybe I was wrong. Not that. We need our brightness curve. Turn that up. And again, these values we're changing, this is non-destructive, right? We could just go back, we could revert these, and we're not changing the underlying Targa or PNG file that we're editing. We're just changing the way that the material is reading them. So this is a good way to tweak your scene as you get closer and you get things dialed into how you want them to be. That's getting there. We got to change the hue now, though. Still way too green. That's gonna be the wrong way, isn't it? Oh, getting there. We're getting there, folks. Okay, I'm good with that. But the big problem now is the scale, right? We have we have these huge divots in here. I would like to change both the, we'll leave that macro variation alone for now, but we want to change the texture and also the normal that is happening here. So let's drag out from our UV and our texture for the diffuse, and we'll type in multiply, and drag out from the A of that and type in texture coordinate. Yep, there we go. And then let's add a scalar multiply, default of 1. And again, remember, we're taking our texture coordinate here and multiplying it by a value to change the scale of the texture as it applies to the material. So we'll be able to dial this in much closer now. And we won't be touching the macro variation while we're at it. So we'll keep that splotchiness. Beautiful splotchiness. Okay, plugged into UV. So we're not going to see a change. It's still at 1, but we'll be able to scale and scrub this value to see how that changes. There we go. Okay, we're getting closer. Yeah, that's good. Okay. And I think that's actually a bit too rough. If this was actually sitting under a light bulb, you'd want it to have some shine on there. So let's turn down the roughness. So our minimum value here is 0.2, and let's make the higher value maybe 0.45. Is there science behind these numbers? Nope. Pulling them straight out of the ass. Let's save those. Oh, that's looking good. Maybe a bit too dark now, but under a light, should be fine. Okay, there we go. That's much better than it was before. If we look at a side-by-side, this is that old material. No, it's not. That's the bronze. Yep. But it's good. We might bump up the specularity, but for now, we'll leave that. Let's make sure the metal is all the way set to 1, because that impacts the reflections quite significantly. Okay. Yeah, we're good there. Then let's look at the railing. This is still using that copper material that we had, but it looks I don't like that. No, this is the bronze now, isn't it? It's I don't like the color that we have in our scene. If we change to an unlit view, we can see it looks too dark. Yeah, what else we got, huh? What else is there? Okay, so the designer maybe didn't tell us what they want. We'll change it to this brushed nickel. See how that looks? Yeah, that looks better. Chrome would be even better, though. Yeah, change it to chrome. Make you chrome too. And lastly, okay. I'm going to let this light build finish, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. Okay, and we can see the shadows on these lights, these spotlights, are really nice. I like that we get some character from the lights themselves, and it actually looks like it's casting out from the middle. If anything, the middles of the lights should be more brightly illuminated. If we have... perfect. Okay, we have glass for these. Let's duplicate this. Let's make this M glass backlit. Let's do something fun for this one. Should be moving quicker now that our light map is done, our light building is done. But sometimes it just chugs along, huh? Okay, here we go. So we are going to replace this here. And let's make this actually a little bit backlit. So what we're going to do is change the glass color. Let's do that first. Let's make this almost like a frosted glass. So we turn that up a little bit. Yep, there we go. And yeah, let's actually take this color glass value and we'll multiply that and plug that into our emissive color. And then we'll take this and make our emissive value, plug that in here. Default, let's leave that at 0, so not emissive at all. We shouldn't see any changes because it's not emitting either way. It's still a transparent material too, so we might see some weird issues. I don't think I've made a material like this before. Another way to do this could be to add a spotlight pointing out from the base of the light through those cracks. That would give us some actually nice volume artifacting. But I'd rather not worry about that. Let's just do something cheap. Okay, so if we do this, and we'll scale it past 1. Look at that. Look at that. That's pretty nice. Okay, we'll go in here. Let's search for emissive. And let's, yeah, we don't want dynamic area lighting. Yes, let's save it. But what we do want to do is we'll select this object and choose to make it emit static lighting. So that will actually be calculated into the light mass. So we'll get some even nicer shadows around here, I think. Okay, so let's go up here, search for emissive, use emissive for static lighting. Yes, okay. And let's do the same thing for these objects. Change all of these. Yeah, there's the... Yeah, that's the one we did. No? This is the... Ah, there we go. It wasn't done. Okay. Take that one there. Yeah. Okay. Change that to yes emissive, and then we'll change the glass on all of those to backlit. Oh, look at that. Nice lit hallway. Okay. I like that. We still have this artifacting here. I'm just going to go ahead and increase this to... let's just recalculate a light map here. So here's our light map that is being used on channel 2. And you can see they broke their cardinal rule. Minimum light map should equal the light map resolution. So we'll change the minimum light map resolution to 128. This is also 128, so we should be good there. We should get some nicer shadows. Might be a little bit more defined. This is now dynamic shadow since that has been changed, but we're good with that. That looks good. Did we not change? Yeah, we didn't change those shadow light maps either. I'm going to go ahead and take this one. I just ungrouped that. I'm fine with that there. Let's take... oh, jeez. Ungroup. Okay. Let's take these top 2 for each of them. except for the last one. And let's open those static meshes, and it should just be 2 of them. Yep, 2 static meshes. Let's go down to our channel 3. Yep, and we'll increase this to 128. Apply. 128 down here as well, and save. Okay, same thing here. 128. Apply. 128. Save. I hope it's fine that these tutorials are so long. I do think that all this information is helpful. If you would like me to cut this up into like 10-minute videos, I'm cool with that. I just want to be as helpful as possible, and I think seeing the back of what goes on to each of these processes is really important. So there's all these parts of the exterior of the building that we don't see, and those are still being calculated into our light map, our light building, but we really don't want them to negatively impact us. Let's save all before you do anything goofy. Merlot. All right, so if we go up to our window, let's go down to statistics, and we can see a breakdown of everything in our scene. By default here for primitive stats, it looks like a ton of gnarly information. Most important thing that I would like to point out is our sum of triangles per object. So if we find where this is in the scene, it's probably going to be a floor or something. Yeah, there it is. It's this railing has the most amount of triangles in it. If you have some big drawbacks, oh, I was wrong. I was not sorting by it. If you have some big drawbacks with, it's probably going to be a chair or table. Some big drawbacks with, yeah, there we go. Performance issues. This could be a part of it. It could be some objects in your scene being way too high poly. For example, if you're standing here in VR, and then you turn this way, and suddenly you're running at a stunning 30 frames a second. Check some of these values. Maybe there's something, either a material or something that's way too high poly for your scene that's just causing some drawbacks. Let's go down to the lighting build info, and we can see where all of the lighting information is going in this. No, that's not lighting build. We want static mesh lighting info. There we go. So up here, these are the values that we overrode to 256 for the resolution. But we can see we have a ton of values here that are 128. We have a shit ton of objects that are 128. We have some that are 64, and that's great. Our sky sphere, our mug's 32, and our floor. Why is the floor 32? Let's find that. Which floor is that? Floor 6. Oh, that? No. What? Whatever. It's not that one. Is it that? Whatever. Okay, so what we could do, remember when we imported from Datasmith and it gave us the options 64 and 128 is what we chose for the minimum and maximum light map values. If we went much higher than that, if we went up to 256, yes, we would have much, much better overall shadows. Like in here, we'd get better shadows in this little dank closet, but we don't want to even worry about that. You can see some light leaking in here. We just want to focus on those areas that we are most concerned with, which is that area and that first floor cafeteria area. So what we could do is we could go in, we could select all of these objects. You know, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hide our exterior walls. Let's hide that as well because we'll see it. We will see the roof. We will not see the roof from the interior. Oh, perfect. Ah, we see it over here. Damn. No. Okay. Let's go to the roof here. We're going to override this. Go to the mesh first. Let's turn this down to 32 for the minimum light map resolution and 32 for the overall light map. We're just going to try to dim down some of those larger values to things that are a bit more usable. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else that's much higher. There's our 32 value. This can be, we'll see that from outside. I'm not going to touch that. Let's do these stairs. This railing here. This railing. And this mullion. Why not? let's just turn that down to 32. Since this is lower than the light map resolution that's built, remember it's built at 64 and now we're going lower at 32, we will see some artifacting, but I don't care, do you? This isn't going to be in the scene, so we could see this conceivably if the user walked all the way down here if we allowed them in VR. So not going to touch that, but if we really wanted, we could go into all these rooms, all these things, like this right here, these. God, I don't know what we'd ever need these for. Let's select, what is this called? Shade support. Let's select all of those. Let's get these floor metal things too, huh? Okay, there's those. And we see what's going on here. Let's just select these. There we go. Okay. If we knew definitively we would never be doing exterior renders, we wouldn't need to see a flyover of the building or anything. We could just straight up delete these, but since we're trying to be as non-destructive as possible, we'll turn that down to 32. Okay, let's hide those. Let's hide that ceiling we changed. Let's search for mullion, and this will give us all of our mullions that we had imported. Okay, let's hide those. And I would like to hide the floor as well. I didn't even know that was there. Let's hide the sky sphere. These lines, those can be down to, hell, let's do 16. Who cares? This, hide the glass, hide that floor. Okay. Now if we were to, God, I can never catch that bird. If we were to Control Alt drag, get rid of the traffic. Ha, there we go. Okay. Let's select those, and I'm going to go ahead and unselect parts of the scene that we might see. So the ceiling is part of it. Yeah, I'm not too concerned with these. Maybe this and this one here. But everything else, let's just override it, turn it to 32, down from 128. If we see some significant artifacting that does cause any concern for us, we can just turn that back up. That's no problem. I'm going to undo that floor because that is in here. And then Control H to unhide everything. Okay, so that'll help us with our light building times. I hate to just waste our time doing that. Okay, so let's move on. We were talking about this this lampshade is all right. Actually, I see some. If we switch to our lighting only, we see some shadows on the edges. So let's take our light, and we'll fix this light map real quick. So it has these nice bands here. Everything is separated very nicely. Let's turn this up to 128. Okay. And that is 128 already. We're good there. And since we changed this one lamp, it's going to be dynamic now, so we're going to have to rebuild our lighting at one point. But let's find where this value is in our browser. So that's 10912, and we'll select these. And we're just going to replace those with that lamp we just changed. So now it has the same lighting issues that are resolved. We could do the same for the tables, for the chairs, for these sofas. Let's look at a more complex object here with the light map. So this has all of the curving, all of the feet, every back surface. It's going to be a bit more complicated, right? We have a lot more going on here. Let's turn that up to 128. Yep, there we go. Okay, all good. And then this is 128 down there. We're good. Are there any sofas? Yeah, we got this other one, these two. Okay, so let's find where this is. Select these two. Boom. Okay, we've now fixed that. Let's take this chair as well. Again, we could have changed this on our import. We could have just bumped up these values if we wanted, but I know my computer will not keep up. So here we are, fixing things after the fact. Okay, 10886. Select these chairs. Okay, there we go. And we're good there. We can do the same for the tables, and ultimately I'll want to fix the edges, make those, as I like to do, make them a little bit rounded. I feel like if I was walking through this space I would inevitably bump into this edge and it would leave like a huge, you know, cut on my leg because it's just so sharp. Look at that. It's like, that is dangerously sharp. I would not want to have that in my office. I'd be, there'd be so much liability there. We see that this wood is cherry, so let's go ahead and find our, I believe there was a nice cherry wood in the starter content. Let's go in there. We have oak, we have pine, walnut. Okay, well let's take one of those values and we'll just replace it. Let's take our let's take the polished walnut first. We see some problems with how that looks. First of all, the splotchiness looks like it's either very dusty or this has been thoroughly soaked in varnish. There's some problems there. The tiling is real bad. But I kind of like that it has lines on it, so I would like to keep some sort of band. Ooh, I take it back. I like that more. What we might want to do too is change the material on the legs. Maybe that would be a darker material. This almost looks like something you would find in a lumberjack's cabin. A lumberjack who cuts wood with sharp corners. Okay, we'll do the same for these tables too. Hey, has that always been there? Huh. Cool. I didn't know that. Alright. So we have our wood pine. And actually, I want to change our material, so we'll duplicate this. We'll call it wood pine _ datasmith. I'm extremely original with my naming conventions. Go up here, bring that into our materials folder, move instead of copy. There we go. And let's pop that open. Okay, here we are. And we want to go for a cherry wood look. So let's look for cherry wood table in our Google search, and we'll try to get close to some of these color values. So it's a dark reddish brown. Let's use this for our value. Let's use this. So we're gonna try to get close to this color value here, and I'll keep referring back to that image. Okay. So the first thing, like we did before, we'll take our wood pine. We'll what did I do? Duplicate that, keep it diffuse, and we'll call this cherry. And move that to our own textures folder. There we go. Okay. And we need to bring that back into our material, so we're not changing the pine. Let's get rid of the alpha from our view. Okay. So here we are. We're going to try to make this close to this as much as we can. All right. So I'm going to be looking, I have my other browser open here. So we're going to turn up the brightness curve to make it darker. We know it needs to be much, much darker. We're getting a lot of artifacting. I don't like that. I don't like how contrasty it is. So we'll keep that at about 1.25. Let's bring our brightness down then to counteract that so we still get some of those dark values. Let's go a bit further. Then we're going to start bringing in some of the color value. We want to, this is a very non-saturated color that we have by default, so we're going to bring that up and then change the hue. Yeah, let's do a green table, huh? Let's, remember it's a 360-degree value. I'll be closer around here. Okay, perhaps too saturated. Got to bring that brightness way down now. Here we go. We're getting close. Getting real close. It's amazing how bright that was, right? Oh, look at that. Okay, let's bump up that saturation. Now we'll start getting that red value to come in. Too much. We're saying we're actually blowing out some of the detail that's in there because it's so aggressive. Let's make that, maybe bring that a little bit closer. Nope, let's try 335. I almost feel like that's too saturated at this point. It's almost like a purple. Oh, ooh, sorry. Yeah, that was too much. Okay, so here we see side by side. We're pretty close in tonal value. Um, let's try saving, and we'll see how that actually applies to our table now. Because ultimately, we're trying to match the image to that table. Um, it looks like we're actually really close, and that did not take long at all, huh? So that pine very quickly changed to this cherry texture. Um, so that I'm really happy with that. Um, okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to multiply the UV to get the right size. And you may be asking, Steve, why did you not show us how to fix this on the front end before we imported anything into Datasmith? And I would tell you, oopsie poopsie, I should have done that. I was not thinking ahead. What we would do, and I can go into this in a different lesson. I don't want to get too sidetracked since we're already taking way too much time. We could have applied a map scaler modifier to all of our geometry meshes that would uniformly scale everything to a certain value. So then we could scale everything to make sure all of our tables, chairs, lamps, sofas, everything would be the correct real-world value. But we're good with this. Good training, good practice for everyone. Okay, so that's I think that's a good size for the texture. But what I don't like is the splotchiness and the roughness. If we look again at the table, it should have some wear along the edges. You can even see here there's a little bit of splotch. Is that a word? There's a bit of splotch on the side. I kind of want to keep that, but the surface should be clean. Again, you don't want to be selling someone on a already dirty place. You want to be selling them on a already realistic place. So let's make this a 0.95 across the board, shall we? 0.95. 0.95. Okay. I don't see a difference, do you? Because we are affecting the darkness that is being transmitted, not the roughness. These values should be close to each other for us to get away from that difference. So let's change this to 0.6, and let's do 0.65. We want to be close, but we do want some variation. We want to be able to look at the surface like this and still see some differences in the roughness value. And I'm good with that. I'm good with it if you are. Again, we might take this in later and just improve some of the edges. You've already seen the workflow there. I don't want to be too redundant, but I do want to show these workflows. Okay, so then we have this leather here. Let's just move down the line, shall we? Let's find our chrome. Let's delete that, and like we did before, m_chrome. We're gonna nope. Do we have a nice chrome? We do have a chrome. We're gonna replace it with the starter content chrome. That's gonna be these feet here. We don't have the same for leather. Yes, let's save all. But this will update all of those in unison. Same for this sofa. Might be a bit too bright, but we could change that later on. I'll show you some cool stuff. Okay, so let's save all before we go any further. Let's work on this leather value. We could go into that realistic rendering project, and we could try to tear apart that leather material that's in there. But this is a good opportunity for us to talk about how to get your own physically based rendering materials. So we go to freepbr.com. This is a really great resource that's out there for finding your own PBR materials. They have, again, these are free for the most part. You have some nice rocks, floors, metals, ground, and so on, cloth and fabric. Let's look at this synthetic material, see if we can find anything that could be used for this table. Plastic and rubber? No, thank you. If they had a leather, we could use that. Hello. Dang. I'm gonna go ahead and find our own textures here for the leather. I don't think I have any handy, do I? I don't. I'll find some textures and we'll bring those in. Yeah, let's I'll pull up the realistic rendering in the meantime. Let's look at these plastic. Is this a trash can? Yes. I don't like these. I don't like these at all. I don't know why they decided to put these here at every station. Maybe this is like a requirement thing that every 2 sofas requires 1 trash can. We're gonna make do with them. We don't want to screw with anyone's requirements. We'll first fix these light maps. So 10897 is our good one. We'll replace these with that. Okay, there we go. And hello, my screen just went black. I see. I have a Steam VR enabled, so it does that whenever there's a new driver that is red. Get rid of that flashing for you guys. There we go. Okay, so I would like to keep this realistic, and we're gonna tuck that in the corner. This one, yeah, let's do the same. Let's bring that back there. Here's a nice cubby for that. Okay. So when you do traditional level design in Unreal, typically you're told to keep on the grid. You can see the grid here, and you can use your grid snaps. In real life, we don't use grids. We don't snap anything. So a nice thing that you might want to do. This is just another one of those things, right? Just take this, make it a little bit askew. Same with the table. I don't know about you guys. At home, do you ever have your tables and your chairs measured to the perfect angle every time for every single situation? Hell no. Hell no, you don't. You know, look at the way you're sitting right now. Your chair isn't at a perfect 90-degree angle. I'm trying to get like a rough... Oh, that was too much. A rough like offset for these, so it's that much more real. This is completely invalidating all of our light maps, but whatever, I'm cool with it. Okay, and let's keep in mind we're not doing this for any architectural elements or anything structural. If you have any structural elements that are offset with rotation, you have a serious problem, and you need to get out of that building as soon as possible. Okay, there we go. All of these are now a little bit askew. Probably never going to notice, but yeah, those things do add up. Okay, let's replace our plastic with something a little bit nicer. The trash cans. Okay, we don't have anything to work with, so let's make our own, shall we? Let's take one that's in the sunlight. Okay, let's open up our plastic. I'd like to rename this to my naming convention I have right now, so it's M_plastic. And we could parameterize this, which we will do. So I'm going to make this MM, so I know for my own sake it's a master material. And I will bring that up to our materials folder. Okay, there we go. We see it's already applied because I just renamed the same thing. If we right click, I will create material instance. So we'll do MI for material instance, plastic_1. And for all these trash cans now, we're just going to put that instance on there. I remember when we did these instances before, this is a really, really great thing to do to keep your materials parameterized. So you keep making these changes, and you do it in such a way that works for you, and you're trying to keep your materials in a nice, orderly organization. This is a really good optimized way to do it. So let's get rid of everything we have in there. Let's start with the color. So let's call this color, as you do. And we had a nice red, so let's bring that back in here. We'll make that red. So red. And we would like to overlay that with texture. So let's search for texture sample. And what kind of overlay would we like? We could make it we want that plastic to be a little bit rough. So let's look for what we have for the concrete. Okay. So we have that concrete grime. Let's see what's going on here. We have yeah, we have some nice noisiness that's going on in here. We could use that macro variation, but I kind of like this. We'll use this and we'll fix it in such a way that's not going to cause us problems. So let's drag out from here. Let's drag out from the red. Let's just mask that out so we can see exactly what's going on here. So this is the value we have, which is black and white, which is great. That's exactly what we want. Let's take that red and let's add a cheap contrast. Okay, and let's add a contrast. Let's do overlay contrast. There we go. And this should be a 0 to 1 value. By default, it's at 0. Okay, and then let's use a blend overlay. And plug that into the color. Important to note that your Photoshop blends, all of those are here in Unreal. So you even have your darken, you have your color burn and dodge, your soft light. You have all of those here at your disposal. So if you're really handy with Photoshop, you can make use of those as you see fit. If we scale up that value now, we can see we should be able to see some changes for the contrast. No, maybe not. Did we do the wrong one? Let's add a power. Let's do overlay power. Let's do 0.5 default. Let's see what we get here when we, yeah, okay. So this is what I want. I want some of that that splotchiness, and then let's also add a texture coordinate, and let's multiply that to get some scale. These are really important things that you should overlay size. These are really good steps to keep in your back pocket for when you're making your own materials for any sort of architectural visualization file. You always want it to be as parametric as possible, so you can just scale some of these values in your instance. And these are really great things to keep in mind. So let's plug that back into our base color. I'm using the wrong blend, perhaps. Let's do a multiply. Yeah, well, that's not what we want, though. We do want it to be a flat diffuse there. What we will do, though, is we'll use this for our roughness value. So for the plastic, we want it to have a little bit of character, keeping in mind that no one's ever going to get close enough to this trash can that they'll notice these values. So let's use that for our linear interpolation. So we're getting a 0 to 1 value. Again, these blacks to whites. We're seeing exactly what it's like with all of the bumped up contrast here. But I would like to add our own roughness value. So we'll, the low end, let's keep this at 0.3 and duplicate that. High end will go a 0.8. Nah, 0.7. Sure. That's too much variation. Let's do 0.45, then 0.7. That should give us, yeah. Okay, we're good there. We could mess with the scale if we wanted to. I just don't want it to be perfect. Nothing in life is perfect. Let's not let our materials be perfect either. So let's do the same thing. Let's copy that over and let's look for the concrete grime. Perhaps we have a normal that goes with it. No, we don't. Let's do an underscore and let's just do something hacky. We'll take one of the normal textures that we have from here. Portland noise now. Rock slate. Yeah, there we go. We get this nice bumpy noise here. Let's copy these. And this is going to overlay size for normal. All right, I'm good with that. And this is a good handy trick here. Let me pull up my notes here. If you want to multiply your noise value without changing the directionality of the noise, this is a really good trick. So we basically want to pull out the blue value so that we can change that independently of the red and green. And we'll make use of that using
masks and then multiplying here. So, where? Okay, here we go. Okay, so we're going to make this multiplying node some normal intensity. Okay, and by default, let's do 1. Okay, we're going to take our red value and we're going to multiply that by that value. Okay. And then we're going to take our green value and we're going to multiply that by the same value. And then we're going to take our, let's see. Yeah, okay. So then we take these two and we append those two. So now this was one value, it's 1, 1 now. We're going to append again the red and green to the blue. So this is back to a red, green, blue, right? So if we were to scale this, we would get the red and green changing without the blue changing. If we change it to 0.5, we'll see, and refresh this here, we'll see a different outlook here. So we get less intensity. If we do, let's go up to 10 and refresh this append. We'll see much more intensity here. So we'll be able to use this. This will be handy. This is a really handy function to have in your back pocket as well. So let's plug that in. We need to refresh that node just to be safe. This almost looks like a rock slate with a concrete grime overlay on it. So we're gonna change that. We're gonna dial that in. You're welcome, Mark. Okay, so yeah, that looks pretty bad, but that's not our final. Let's change our normal intensity to, yeah, look at that. Let's bring that real close, okay? And then our overlay contrast, yeah, let's dial that in a little bit. Overlay size normal, we want that to be pretty big. Okay, that's good. Then let's bring some of that normal back, not too much. Okay. There's a storm brewing in the background. I hope you guys don't hear that. Hope that doesn't cause any problems here. Okay, that's good. The reason I put so much work into this is because I was thinking we'll actually use this going forward for other materials as well. So maybe we'll use this for like even our shade poles here, or maybe our railings, whatever we need. Anything that's plasticky, synthetic, non-metallic, notably, and not using a macro variation. And let's dial that saturation down because that's a bit too aggressive. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, I like that. It's more deliberate now. And if we were to get some high resolution screenshots, we'd actually maybe even pick up some of the light being caught from there. All right, let's go to our realistic rendering project. Hello. Let's search for our leather in here. Am I still recording too? Yeah, we're still good. Okay, so we have our leather, diffuse, normal, and specularity, and we will just migrate those in. Thank you, thank you. Tutorial content, great. Okay. All right. So let's make our leather. Like I was saying before, we could I could just cut this off, and we could I could let you figure this out on your own, but this is really important stuff, and I really think you'll keep making use of some of the information I'm covering here. So I'd like to, you know, give you guys as much to work with as possible. We're gonna do the same thing we did with that plastic just now. So let's make all these chairs the same first, and then we'll make those sofas a different material. So that's our first material instance that we have. Let's look at one in the light with the shadow. Okay. Again, let's delete all of those, and let's find where those leather textures ended up. Diffuse, normal saturation. We'll bring those into our textures folder so we know exactly where they are. Okay, and then let's just drag each of those into our material here. You'll see it came in exactly the way we need them to. If we wanted to really optimize this, we'd change this to linear, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Let's just get our base color in here. We'll get our specular. Let's get our normal. Then let's get our texture coordinate, and we'll multiply that again. Let's not worry about moving this with a add node or rotating it. We shouldn't need to. Texture scale default 1. Okay. So by default, we're gonna get a nice red leather with some bumpiness and some directionality to it. It looks, I mean, it works, but that's not what we want, is it? Not at all. So let's look at our realistic rendering. Let's see how they broke it up. And they did this in the actual game dev sort of way, if you will. Everything is very highly parameterized here, which is the way you need it to be. This whole couch with all of these complicated materials, even the metals, are in the same material. You can see everything is fed through these different sections. They have a ton of information. And the same thing, texture coordinate with the scale. They're actually breaking down this couch object with this mask here. And you can, let's look at the way they're doing it. So with the red channel, you get this. With the green channel, you get this, which is probably used for the metal, right? So that would be the feet here, and that would be maybe like the side or something. If you go to the blue, this is probably giving them some of the, just the grunge and like the scratches that happen and the rubbing that's on the side of the couch. So they're breaking it up so it's all in one texture, and they're using those masks to drive all of this information. Yeah, so there's the wear spots, metallic, specular. See what they did for the specular. So it's being fed through to the specular. Go figure. And roughness is something else. So their specular values were 0.03 and 0.5. All right, so that tells us kind of where we want this to be. So that is in specular. We want that to actually linear interpolate. Let's make that just one value. So let's do spec low. Plug that in here. And spec high. Plug that in up here. If we wanted to add our character with wear and scratches and everything, we might want to make like a customized map that we would plug into roughness. Roughness is where you would go to get most of your customized most of your customized character that you would have in these objects. Just notice we're in the MI leather 1 instead of an instance. Steve made a boo-boo. Okay, let's find where this is, and we'll very quickly let's rename this to leather. We already did. We did. Let's call this just 2. I don't want to cause any problems here. Let's call this leather, and then we'll just make an instance of that. So that's leather 1. Son of a... Whatever. leather 2. Fine. All right, there we go. So now when we open this up, we do have those parameters we can change. So let's bring our specular low and our high up. Yeah, there you go. You get some of that character now. You get the light shining across that leather. Our scale's too big. Let's bring that up. And to get some fake wear, I'd like to grab that macro variation that we saw previously. So let's open up this material that we have, our concrete, and we can just we'll just copy this and bring that up here. There we go. So this information is actually saved as straight text. So you could send this to yourself in an email. You could write it down in a text document if you wanted to, and it would, if you just copy these nodes, you can just paste them as text. So that can be helpful for keeping this information handy. Okay, so let's take this, yeah, and we'll multiply by a roughness value. Let's get that 1 for now, and linear interpolate that. We'll do a rough low, great, and a rough high. And again, this is just a hacky thing. We're just trying to get something on there so we get somewhere. Okay. So we have our roughness at 0. That means it is wet. So let's bring that in. Okay. And for that matter, we need to change the scale of these independently of just our macro texture. So let's add a multiply by our own macro scale, 1 by default. Okay, and all these will feed through that. So these multiplies are being used to just break up that macro variation into 3 separate sizes. But if we can uniformly scale those, we can get it closer to what we need. There we go. That's pretty good. But we can see a lot of difference in there. So let's bring these values closer together. You can almost see it's like kind of green on the back. I want it to be like nice, but I don't want it to be like tacky. No one likes sitting on like a tacky leather chair, right? This shouldn't be 90-degree sharp either, right? What we could do is we could bring in a 3ds. We could like put some ornamental stuff on here. I'm awful with 3D modeling though, so I'm hesitant to even touch that. Well, we'll see some differences when we do the light build too. So let's we can come back to that. So we have this. I know that we'll want to make this like a tan leather. So let's parameterize this in such a way that we can change the red to whatever we want. Okay. So here we go. Let's take this red. Let's get a color value, which is a vector. So let's call that color. And let's try our overlay again. Blend. There we go. So this is blending with a black color, so it should just give us a black leather by default. Let's look over here and make sure. Yep, there we go. And now if we were to change that vector, yeah. Oh man. Okay. Let's go back to black for now. So we have that applied to that chair there, and I would like to make another instance. So if you just duplicate that one, you get one with the same parameters. Let's bring that to these couches. There we go. Okay. And our MI Leather 2, which is on those sofas, we can go in here with our new color parameter. And let's change that back to the red so we get the values we had previously. And that's actually pretty close. Okay, there we go. And now if we go to our MI Leather 3, let's make this tan. Okay, there we go. A bit too much splotchiness from the macro texture. But I think it's fine. Oh yeah, look at that. Look at that shine. Yeah, and this roughness value here is just like a overall multiplier, so I could use that to scale it uniformly if we needed to as well. I like that that is a different value than these. maybe more people have sat in this tan chair, so it's actually worn a little bit more. Okay, there we go. It's just going to compile our shaders as we got out of there. I don't like that it looks the same as the concrete, so I'm going to make some calls here, and we're going to tell our designer, hey, that looks like garbage. Let's make it something other than that red. Maybe it'd be like a dark brown. But again, not like a tacky dark brown. Yeah, we'll come back to it. Sometimes if you look at a texture for too long, if you look at a color, it just kind of loses all meaning. Like when you say a word over and over, like bubble or tweezer or nuclear. Yeah, these color values are too close. If we go to our unlit view, you can see that this metal is too much like this concrete. Dang. Yeah, well, we're fine with it. Let's go ahead and do some other light tweaks here before we do another light build. Again, I switched these back to normal. Our light bounces are back to 10. We're going to try building ambient occlusion, and we're going to generate this in our materials. This is going to show us how to do some extra detailed stuff that we haven't done before. So we'll turn that on, leave these at default. What we could do is uncompress the light maps, and that would get rid of even more of this artifacting. By default, your light maps compress at 1024. You can actually see how it packs them. It's very interesting. But all of your light maps are packed into 1024 by 1024 textures. We could bump that up to 2048. I know my computer's not going to be able to handle it. You can try it if you're really confident, but I won't. You could get some better detail there, but we're going to keep it compressed for now, but that's up to you. Everything else down here doesn't relate to what we're doing. VR, let's not touch that right now. Okay, so environment color. This is like our overall shadow density. If you are in a scene and you really don't like how your shadows are like pitch black, like in here, you could bump this up. You can maybe bring it in here. It's a bit arbitrary, honestly, but I'm not gonna really touch that at all. One thing I would like to do, let's find our directional light, and I want to get some better contact shadows, and by that I mean the shadows that are right here, like right under the feet, right where it meets the floor. Let's get an example of what that might look like, huh? Yeah. Okay. So these are examples of people not having it, but yeah, these circled areas where you get yeah, people touching the floor right there. We want to get that effect with all of our furniture. We don't want it to ever look like the furniture is floating. We did improve that, yes, with the improved light maps, but we can do better. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our light map up here. We're going to go down to, if we search for contact shadow length. This is a very, very touchy option. 0.1 is the maximum even. It's so touchy. If you turn this up, you'll probably see some artifacting on ceilings. Anything reflective, it might start to fall apart. I like to turn it down to like 0.06 is a good value to keep it at. We'll see how that is impacted in the light build too. This shadow, this sharp shadow, sure, it's nice. If you were to look up right now UE4 architectural visualization videos or something, you would find, I swear, 100 different video fly-throughs of Eastern European IKEA model apartments that people have made in Unreal with all of their, super high-res textures and their sharp shadows and all that bullshit. It's great. Don't get me wrong, it looks fantastic, but this is not realistic, right? You might have this when the sun is at the peak, when you have no clouds in the sky. You would have these shadows, sure, We don't want that. We want it to be closer to realistic. So we're going to turn our light source angle up. For light source angle. Maybe you can see what this is actually doing. But this is, again, showing the atmosphere, how that would impact the lights. Right, so here's a visual example. You get the softer shadows, and not only that, but we're going to be able to get rid of some of the artifacting by doing that. So this value up here, again, is the dynamic parameter, light angle. This one down here, light masses for our baked lights. We're going to make that match. Yeah, look at that already. We're seeing some difference. So that'll help us quite a bit. Again, I want to keep the intensity at 3.14. I like where that's at. I like all of these details we're getting. I would like to increase the resolution on these that we're getting from the shadows with the skylights. So I'm going to go into, let's just do one of them. Our UV here, UV channel 2. Apply, 128, good. 6306, we're going to apply that to these two as well. Great, okay. So those will be a bit better. This wall, yeah, let's fix this wall real quick. I'm going to take this plastic that we have, and we're going to use that for the wall. Let's call this synthetic. MI plastic 1, and we'll call this MI paint 1. Okay. And I would like to apply that paint to all of these walls, and we're going to try to get close to that golden wheat color. I think it's not a nice color, but you can blame the interior designers, huh? There we go. Oops. Okay, great. So all those colors, oh man, this looks like bad. Okay. We'll open that up. Get closer to country wheat. What does country wheat even look like, huh? I live in Kansas. I should know this, right? Okay. Let's get that a little bit more yellow. Less green. Yeah. There we go. I don't like how saturated that is. I want the lighting to bounce off there and illuminate the room, but I don't want it to be so aggressive, but that's closer. So now we do have some bumpiness on here. That's from the lighting, but we can mess with that normal here. Overall contrast, overlay size. Are you seeing a difference? I'm not seeing a difference. Ah, there it is. Okay. I'll show you some tricks for getting a better wall here in a bit, but just want to get something on there. Okay, so we get a little bit of bumpiness. Keep in mind too, if your wall should not be bumpy, say if it's in like an operating room or a healthcare environment, you should never be able to see bumps on it like this. So this is just adding a little bit of character and a little bit more information for the light to bounce around with. So we're good with that. This metal paint finish. Let's replace this concrete with our own concrete. This will change for all those stairs then. Save those. Okay, great. So there's an improvement. We could go in and we could change that metal there too. But looks like we're pretty good. Time for another light build, so I will leave it there. This is turning into quite the series. Let's see, anything we should change in here? No, let's call it good. I'll leave this on medium so we can get some better information. And I will catch you in the next one.
So sometimes things happen in life that just aren't fair. I don't know if this is something I showed you guys how to do by accident or what. I'm having a Unreal Lightmass error, exception access violation. Typically that means there's something wrong with the swarm cache. I tried to clear that. Tried migrating everything to a fresh level. That's not working. Earlier on, I was talking about some of my PC problems and hardware related. I think it might be something with my hard drive or my GPU. I have no idea. But there are a few things I still want to cover in this short series, so we'll just dive into that realistic rendering project. But yeah, this is what it looks like when your light build doesn't work. You get the preview lighting everywhere, and everything's just dynamic. If we were to continue in this environment, I would like to maybe break up these rails. We have these sharp corners here. Maybe give it a little bit more character. We could make some custom vertex painted roughness maps for the furniture in here. And I also wanted to add baseboards to the walls. That's just like one really subtle thing that adds a lot of information. It's very visually appealing, but it's very subtle. Also, I don't like these lights very much. I don't like the color, and these doors, we'd have to redo those. The door frames look kind of funky. And we didn't do much in this cafe area. We could add props on the tables and so on. But regardless, I think this did a sufficient job of showing you guys how to get started in Unreal for architectural visualization. I'm always happy to answer any questions, and I would be really, really happy to keep this rolling and maybe start with another scene. So if you have anything in mind you would like me to cover, I would be happy to share that with everyone and keep rolling. So here's our scene. We're just going to get rid of this for now, and let's open up this project here. I will say too, before we just abandon that previous project, if you are ever doing client work, keep a lot of backups. Occasionally at the end of the day, I typically just duplicate the project, keep it on an external server, in case I get beer trucked or something catastrophic happens to our first project, you always have something to fall back on. Additionally, I think my problem is hardware related, so I would recommend migrating to a different machine entirely, rebuild your engine from source, whatever you got to do, because when it comes to clients, you can't not have your product working. So there are some things we could do, but again, this is just like a free series I'm making, so I'm not going to worry too much about that right now. Anyway, here we are in our realistic rendering project, and I'd like to cover some final notes in here pertaining to lighting and post processes. We talked before about how this was made years ago by Epic, and there have been a lot of features that they have added since then that would really be helpful. And here, I'd also like to point out these IES profiles. These are, we briefly touched on these. This is the image of what the light would look like when it casts on the wall. These are readily available by a lot of manufacturers, and this is what it looks like in use. Up here, all of their lights are set to stationary, so they're dynamic as well as baked, but they also have it set to unitless intensity, and I like to prefer lumens. I believe that's what our Revit architects typically use, and then you can just assign your intensity value to match that. You'll notice too the intensity is grayed out because we're using this IES texture, and that's overriding it too. So that's a bit of that. Let's look at post processes first. So if we search up here in the world outliner, they actually have two post processes happening in the scene. They're both enabled. Let's just look at them real quick. This first one is brightening up the scene and adding some subtle camera effects and some not so subtle camera effects. And they have this other one here as well, which is what's the difference? I think it's just doing something very similar. Maybe they're just layered, so to speak. Yeah, I can't tell the difference at all. Okay, so let's look at what the post process is. I like to think of it as turd polish. A lot of the effects in here are just cinematic, right? So you have your obvious color grading, and here you can change the white balance, which is a very filmic sort of thing you can do. Tint your image. You can change the saturation, contrast, and all of the image qualities for different parts of the image. And you can also use LUTs or LUTs. These are lookup tables. And let's see if they have one in here, actually. They don't. A lookup table is is a special image that you can upload that shows. Here's an example here. So these are the same image with different lookup tables applied, and this is an example of what different lookup tables look like. It's editing the RGB spectrum to look like a certain cinematic style, I suppose would be a way to look at it. Obviously, you can get some very intense looks here. This is bumping up the saturation and adding contrast and really bringing out certain details. It's very impressive when it works well. I will say that, and typically I stay away from them because, again, we're going for realism. We're not trying to make anything cinematic. So typically I stay away from lookup tables, but if you're in game design or doing anything with an advertising approach to your image, that may be a helpful thing to investigate. I can go into a whole tutorial about how to make your own lookup table, but currently you can just go online. You can just search lookup table, and you can find plenty of examples of those free ones to download too. These film effects, these help adjust like an S curve for some of your values, so you can get deeper contrast and more dynamic range for your image. Let's ignore the mobile tone mapper. That's more for mobile, obviously. Everything here under lens. These are effects that we should typically always stay away from for VR. And for that matter, if you ever touch these for just ArcViz non-VR, be very, very gentle with how you approach these. You can get carried away very, very quickly. Let's start with the most obvious one, depth of field. Here you can set your obvious image depth as if you had a shallow depth of field or a zoom lens or what have you. You can simulate that here. Circle DOF is typically the best quality, but I believe that is being replaced in 420, the next Unreal update. So we'll see some better effects in there. But again, for VR, you should never be doing anything with depth of field, right? Because your human eye does not have set depth of field like that. It can be very confusing for the user. Okay, so out of these other effects, these are all essentially, if you really think about it, these are camera flaws that are parts of more sci-fi and modern visual style. There's nothing wrong with them. Don't get me wrong. These are very very interesting effects. If we look at modern sci-fi styles, you can really see a lot of these at play. So chromatic aberration is the biggest one. This is not really going to do us any justice at all. So chromatic aberration here, this is when a cheap camera lens, you're looking at a highlight in the sky and the lens itself begins to act like a prism. So if we bump this up, make it really exaggerated, you can see this edge here has that tint to the right and then to the left. This does happen for cheaper or poorly manufactured lenses. That's really the best way to see this in practice. Bit of a tangent, but a couple of years ago I got my eyes dilated for a eye test, and I could actually see chromatic aberration, and it was the trippiest thing I've ever seen in my life. I was driving somewhere, probably shouldn't have been driving, and I could see like this fringing on my steering wheel. I was like, what is going on? But no, it's when the viewpoint is so exaggerated, it's acting like a prism, and you can get some interesting visual styles by doing that. It does help to increase the realism, yes, because if you are simulating a camera lens, you want it to have all of the flaws of a camera lens. But if you're trying to make a nice image, don't make it look like you couldn't afford a good camera, right? On to bloom. This is pretty obvious. This is bumping up the blur that you get from looking at a light. Think if you had like Vaseline smeared on the camera lens. If you have this up, you're basically saying that your camera sensor is blown out, and you're getting these sharp highlights. By default, it's set to standard. If you set to convolution, I wonder if we can get some interesting
views of that here. It adds more of a realistic sort of bloom effect on here. I don't know if we'll be able to see it very well. Yeah, well, it's very nice for like car headlights and you know, a very fine-tuned bloom like that. It can be very effective again, but I prefer to stay away from it. And if you have this in VR, your user could think that the lenses need to be wiped with a microfiber cloth or something. It can be frustrating to work with. So there's the bloom. Lens flare. Everybody knows lens flare. It's obviously pretty self-explanatory. If you want to do anything either with this or bloom, I would recommend adding your own custom textures for this. You can get a much more believable style here. But again, you know, that's all up to you. Exposure, by default, you probably want the set to 1 and 1 just so it doesn't scale up and down the exposure. Like here I'm looking at a dark part of the image and it is not changing the exposure. Whereas if I'm over here, that is correctly lit. But if we, let's set this back to default. And this is what typically happens when you have your own project, right? Everything adjusts to the lighting as you move around. But I don't like having exposure messed with when I'm trying to color balance the scene. Everything here in camera, this is more to simulate like a physical camera shape. That's all new stuff, and I'm sure it's going to be changing in the future as well. Correct me if I'm wrong, VR folks who may be watching, but this vignette intensity, this is by default set to 0.4. I believe the best thing to do is to revert this to 0, right? Because you don't want any vignetting whatsoever, unless it's obviously intentional. But I always set this to 0, down from the 0.4. It's very subtle as well, but I believe that's better for VR. And grain here, this can be helpful if you're doing static images for your renders, adding some realistic grain effects to happen in here. It's also very subtle, but these things do add up, right? Okay, onward. Ambient cube map. This is a tricky one. If we take our HDR image, we turn it on, we can see it's applying every lighting from that image across everything, and it's almost simulating a skylight if you, for whatever reason, refuse to use a skylight. I've seen people set this to like 0.01 or something, and you can get like some nice, you know, fill light happening in some of these places. It's I think they're going to get rid of this option. Honestly, it seems like the wrong way to do everything. So I'd recommend avoiding that one entirely. Post-processed materials, that's if you want to make a material that can do something complicated, like add like a Tron like overlay to everything, or colored depth of field, things like that. There's a lot of tutorials out there, but I'd be happy to dive into some of those as well. Let's come back to ambient occlusion. Global illumination, this is just adjusting your indirect lighting intensity. Pretty straightforward what it does, and you can tint that as well if you want to add some interesting effects. Motion blur, it does exactly what you think it does. Light propagation volume, I've never really touched this. If anyone could provide any information on this, I'd be happy to dive into it a bit further. I believe this is taking your you know what? I have no idea. It's not related to the light mass importance volume, as far as I'm aware. Screen space reflection. So your reflections are either screen space or not. If you have your reflection probes in the scene, here you can adjust some of the intensity for your overall reflections. I've seen people turn this up to like 200, and you maybe not. Oh, maybe that's the quality. Quality by default set to 50. If you adjust these, you can get some funky looks. It's interesting what you can do, but by default, you're probably going to want to keep it standard at where it is. And then miscellaneous, you can add some, you can upscale the screen percentage. So if you were recording a video, for example, or if you wanted to adjust the super sampling of the pixel density in VR, you could bump this up to that was a bad idea. You could bump that up to whatever you want. Be mindful, though, that does severely impact performance.
obviously, if you're rendering 200% of the pixels, you're going to hit a GPU problems pretty quickly. And don't think that fixes bad meshes. You can't super sample something just so it looks good if it's already bad in the first place. So let's come back to ambient occlusion. So when we were in our world settings, I hope this isn't what broke it before, but you can bake ambient occlusion into your lighting. And then you can also do ambient occlusion here. So if let's disable this first. Let's make it intensity of 0. Ambient occlusion is referring to all of the shading that happens between two objects. So think if you have a light shining from this direction, light isn't going to be able to get down here. Maybe you'll have like a bounce hit here, and then it'll bounce and bounce and bounce, and it gets darker and darker and darker as it gets closer and closer to the object, right? So if we go to our show, let's do... buffer. Yeah, buffer ambient occlusion. Here we can see nothing. If we bump up our intensity again, we can sort of see what's happening here. So if we get to these areas like the back of a cubby, you can see it gets darker and darker towards the edges. Let's make sure this is all set back to default. Oops. There we go. It's not really showing very well, is it? There we go. Okay, so you can kind of see what it's doing now. If you think of it as like that fine shading that happens around objects. If we go to our lit mode, you can see it even better now that I bumped up that power. It almost adds like a grungy look if you bump it up way too far. I will point out too, if you let's say you're looking at this arm here, let's go back to our AO view here. Yep. So if you turn on world space, it handles your ambient occlusion entirely differently. You can get a lot of haloing effects if you do this incorrectly. So like let's see if we back up further. Yeah, you can see a bit of a glow around the edge of this chair. I don't know if it's showing on the screen very well, but some of these objects, they get like a dark ring around them. It can be pretty dramatic. Typically, as I understand it, if your lights are built correctly, you will never need this ambient occlusion. This is just a fix, if you will. It can be used, sure, but if you use it, be very, very careful. This is set to 1 intensity. I maybe set it down here, keep that radius tight, and keep in mind, like, what would it actually look like? Would you have these dark shadows? If you have this really bright room, would you have the AO up here? I mean, this dark shadow here, that might not make sense given the context of the scene. So ambient occlusion can be very powerful, but it can also quickly ruin the immersion of your scene. So be mindful of that, and try to balance that with your light build itself. They can play off each other pretty well. I said earlier we'd go through some of the can't skip this. So down here, this is set to enabled right now, and then you also want to set to unbound. So really, this post process is set in such a way that it's a box. Where is it selected here? Yep. So if you were in the box, you would experience these effects. If you were outside of the box, you would not experience these effects. So for architecture, unless you're doing some funky location-based effects, you'd always want to keep that unbound and turn on the enable as well. So I said earlier in this series that we would talk about some of these mysterious options that you have in your lighting. So obviously intensity, by default, you probably want this set to 3.14. That's just kind of the best option that has been found out. Light source angle, again, that's telling you about the amount of density in the atmosphere and how the light spreads out and scatters because of that. Temperature here, you could add a temperature to your sun, same with point lights, directional lights, and so on.
Cast shadows, a fixed world. Your indirect lighting intensity, this is going to refer to your global illumination and all of the light bouncing around. If we drop down here, anything worth talking about? Yeah, you can add some dramatic sun shafts in here to simulate volumetric lighting. That can be a very interesting effect. This is not good for VR at all. And then you can add bloom to that as well to make it even more cloudy in the room. And then this is again the atmosphere in the cloud for your static lighting, saturation, and then the shadow penumbras for your light bake. Yeah, a lot more we could dive into, but I suppose I could answer any specific questions as they arise. So thank you for sitting through all of this. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to elaborate on anything, and maybe we'll be able to get that other project up and running at some point. But until then, let me know if you have any questions.